We've reached the top of the hour, so I'm delighted to welcome everyone formally to today's webinar, Unlocking Contact Centre Emotional Intelligence. I'm Rachel and I'll be your webinar chairperson today. I'm delighted to welcome three brilliant speakers to our panel today. I'd like to welcome back Sandra Thompson from EI Evolution to our webinar programme. Hi Sandra.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you? How's, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Of course. So I've worked in customer experience and employee experience for quite a while now. I run a consultancy for around 11 years. And I've been a big fan of emotional intelligence for quite some time. About 20 odd years ago, I read the book that Goleman wrote. And since then, I've become an emotional intelligence coach where I've been taught techniques, and I'm busy trying to teach people how to become more emotionally intelligent. So thank you so much for having me here. I can't wait to hear what everyone has to say and what the guys listening in also have to say on this topic.
Brilliant. Well, delighted to have you, and also delighted to welcome to her first webinar, Anna-Marie Quinn from Somse. Welcome.
Thank you, Rachel, and hello everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really passionate about this subject for a number of reasons, especially the environment that we find ourselves in now, that we're looking at hybrid and things like that. So just to give you a wee bit of background, I work for a company called Sensei. I've worked for them for 8 years, and they have been on the go since 2004, bringing work to people. As well as that, I'm a mental health counsellor. So again, emotional intelligence and all of that, and how that can lend itself to ourselves within the environments, within the contact centres that we're in, and the times that we're in, how it can lend itself and support and help. So again, like Sandra, I can't wait to hear what everybody has to say. I think this is so worthwhile. So thank you, Rachel.
Brilliant, and we can't wait to hear from both of you as well. And also delighted to welcome back Jeremy Payne from Enghouse Interactive. Welcome back, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you for everyone that's attending today to give us a chance to participate in this event. It looks like it should be a really good session.
And would you like to introduce Enghouse Interactive as well?
Yeah, I mean, Enghouse is a software company. It's been around over 30 years, and the primary focus of the business has always been customer interaction management, in its various forms, and it's evolved, from what was call centers to contact centers to AI to bots and all the other good things that come with it. But we've been fortunate enough to work with lots of different customers, different sizes, different vertical markets, and we're thrilled that one of those customers is Somse that join us today.
Brilliant. Well, delighted to have you all on our panel today. And to the audience, just a reminder, we are taking a replay and slides will be available later on this afternoon on callcenterhelper.com/recorded-webinars. We are running a discussion alongside in our chat room. That's available on callcenterhelper.com/chat, or we do have this short term, which is just cch.chat. It is in a separate window, but hopefully if you've got a big enough screen, you can put them side by side, or a lot of people have the chat room on their mobile phones. So an added bonus of being in the chat room is that you can already download a copy of all our panelists' slides. That's available just by clicking this link up here. Another added bonus of being in the chat room is that you can ask a question of all our panelists. You just need to put #question to ask a question, and we have a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for sharing your top tips. So just use #tips so we can identify them. So before we begin today's webinar, I'd like to share a poll, which is how emotionally intelligent is your contact center? So I'm just going to relaunch this poll. There we go. So do you have great levels of rapport and empathy? Is it generally good but somewhat inconsistent? Does it vary considerably between advisors? Do you try our best or not very much? Sandra, what sort of thing do you think is going to come out?
I have a feeling it varies quite considerably between advisors, or can I go for two? Or generally good but somewhat inconsistent. I think it will depend.
I think you can see my screen, so I'm going to end the poll and share it. Yep, 50% of people saying it varies considerably between advisors, then 33% saying generally good but somewhat inconsistent. Then we have great levels of rapport and empathy, and also we try our best. And finally, lastly, not very much. You know, is that the sort of thing you were hoping to see, Anna Marie?
I was going with number 2, Rachel, but I think the fact that the third one has stole it really lends itself to what I'm going to be talking about as well. So very interesting.
Fab. And Sandra, you're agreeing as well?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is every single person is different. Every single person has a different imprint of how they feel emotion, how they respond to it. I didn't want it to be that one, but I'm not surprised.
I think this is a great opportunity to hand over to you for your presentation. So let me just stop sharing.
Thank you. So let's see what we've got here then. So now I normally start off a presentation like this talking about how fantastic emotional intelligence is and how it's great for our health. But very often people ask me, what does it do to the bottom line? And so I'm here to tell you that it's good for business as well as good for our health and well-being. Why? Why is that? Well, let's take, for example, a worldwide cosmetics company. They did some research where they looked at a group of people who had emotional intelligence and a group of people who did not have that skill. And here's a surprise, $91,000. The people with emotional intelligence managed to make that per year on top of what the guys who didn't have emotional intelligence. So that's how much money people with this skill can make. And I'm sure that financial directors out there would be pretty pleased to hear that. There's other things as well to do with HR, to do with human resources and how we get on with one another when we have this skill. And the fact is, there is also research to say that formal grievances come down. And that's just a small sample. Again, it depends on your organizational size. But when you have the skill of emotional intelligence, there are fewer formal grievances. That's big. Not only do you have less friction and less conflict, the productivity goes up. It goes up by an astonishing amount. And again, when I share this deck with you, I'll give you the references so that you can find more about this stuff yourselves. But that's pretty impressive. And then when we think about individual performance, people who have the skill of emotional intelligence will at least have 2 more promotions than those who do not. So down to the hard cash. Now, this is an example taken from professional services. This isn't contact center relevant, but it does make a point about how you can increase how much you charge because of having this skill. So this is actually in the profession of a legal firm. They are making more money per hour. They're making more profits and they're having higher client retention. And here's the stuff I normally start with. People who have emotional intelligence are more productive. They do keep more clients and they build stronger relationships. And again, this isn't just with their customers, but this is with their peers. This is with their bosses, with their team leaders, with their leaders. They are active and effective listeners, and they are brilliant communicators, both verbally and non-verbally. And as we know, even from this call, where we can see one another, when we can see facial expressions and body language, we can read it far more effectively when we have the skill of EQ. And this is the thing I normally start on, is that we have better physical and mental health. And that is critical, as we know from the last year. So I don't want to call it soft skills. I want to call this stuff power skills, because ultimately when you master the skill of emotional intelligence, and it's not something you can do and then forget about, you've got to keep working at it, you can make more money, you can feel happier, healthier, you have better relationships, not only with your customers, with your peers and your leaders and team leaders, you can get more work done. It's a better place to be. So let's go to Goldman. Let's go to this book where it's actually celebrating its 25th year anniversary this year. It's astonishing to know that, in fact, through this time in COVID, this particular theme is coming to a head. It's coming to all of us as a really important thing to consider. Emotional intelligence is not just empathy. A lot of people mix those two terms up, and I'll come on to that again in just a second. But imagine having the ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and in others. This isn't a small feat. This is simple words, but quite a big thing to be able to do. It's your ability to manage your behavior and your relationships. Now, emotions come and go. They are like a sea. They can come and go every day. We have thousands of them. But how often do we stop for a minute to recognize what they are? Do we feel elated and happy? Do we feel concerned? Do we feel a sense of anger coming up? And this is where we understand this is a skill. Emotional intelligence is something you need to invest your time in. And here is just an outline of a model that I use quite frequently. It's taken from the Harvard Business Review. I'll give you the link. You can check this out for yourself. Emotional intelligence starts with emotional self-awareness. Excuse me. That's self-awareness. And what would you say if I said to you that you are not at the mercy of your emotions? You're not. So I know some of you may have seen the film Inside Out. It's a great story of a child who goes through life, and we talk about their emotions, etc. The thing is, Pixar got it wrong, because there isn't a central dashboard where your brain is controlling what you're going on. You can actually override that system if you want. And if you decide that emotions are not in service to you, you can choose not to dwell in them. And that's why journaling, writing down how you feel, spending a couple of moments a day just to sit with whatever you're feeling, having the space to just reflect on how you are, how something an email or maybe a conversation may have triggered you in some way. That's what emotional self-awareness is. It's the first thing, and it's a big thing. The next part of this particular model is all around self-management. Again, we are like graphic equalizers. We are kind of happy, sad, we're all sorts of things. And certainly in neuroscience, we know that every single individual is completely different. How they process emotion, how they put meaning to emotion. And that's where I'd like to invite you to focus on what you can influence. Try your hardest to just consider how you show up and how you want to be. Because the more you let the emotions of others have an impact on you, the less control you have, and it's highly likely that you might not be in the happiest place. When you conquer emotional intelligence, you are more adaptable, you have a greater achievement orientation, and you have a positive outlook. So I invite you to be curious about the emotions that come up. Don't judge them good or bad. They're not those. It's the meaning that you attach to them that gives them that label. And then we go to empathy. As I've said, empathy is one part of this skill. There are 3 levels. We want you to get to a point where you can use your compassionate empathy to take decisions, to do something about it. And the wonderful thing about these 3 blocks is that once you've mastered those, the relationship management happens in a beautiful way. You can influence, coach, you can avoid conflict, you can be brilliant at teamwork, and you will often become an inspirational leader. Now, I know that we have seen this a number of times, this particular quote, which is attributed to Maya Angelou. But how often do we really think about how we make others feel? How often do you invite others, when you give them feedback, to make them realize how they may have made you feel? This is a hot topic. And unless we're able to articulate how we feel and we let others know what impact they're having, we're just going to stand still. So here's some steps that you might want to think about. Take some time just to think about the emotions that are happening in you. Don't judge them. They're not good or bad. And if you can, just spend 2 minutes a day. Just set your timer, 2 minutes a day. Just being aware of your breathing, you're onto something. Then you might want to consider taking a mindful walk. Now, it all sounds a bit fluffy, but the fact is that when you take a walk and you think about maybe some flowers or the singing of the birds or whatever it might be, And when your mind wanders, you come back, you're actually teaching your brain how to become more adaptable. And that's the amazing thing. We have this brain that we can actually influence. It's called neuroplasticity. We're not set, we can change over time. And the final thing here then is to consider silence if you can. If you can get some ear defenders, just 5 minutes, and that will actually restore your nervous system. So here it is. You are not at the mercy of your emotions. You can choose to respond rather than react. Just take a couple of moments, because believe you, I know that if I fly off the handle, if I react to something, the amount of time it will take me to repair the damage that's done will be far more than 2 minutes if I chose to respond. Focus on what you can influence. Be curious about the emotions that rise in you. Keep a journal if you can, and maybe try 5 minutes if you're able to. Let's go to the polls.
Thank you very much for that, Sandra. So I'm just going to launch this first poll, which is, do you measure customer emotion in your contact centres? Yes, directly. Yes, indirectly, e.g. comment boxes on surveys. No, or you're not sure. Sandra, what sort of things do you think people are going to say?
I have a feeling that it might be yes, indirectly. I think that the directly is growing. I think it is becoming more of a measurable aspect of work, but I think it might be indirectly. I don't know.
Jeremy, do we have you in the background? I don't know whether you've seen people measuring it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Sandra. I think you will find there's like yes directly and yes indirectly. Certainly most of the people we work with in some way, shape or form are measuring something.
So I will share those results. Yeah, actually both right. Yes,
Bingo.
indirectly, 43%, then 38% saying no, and then joint kind of 10% yes directly and not sure. Sandra, is that kind of what you were hoping? I mean, obviously you got it right, but was that what you were hoping to see?
No. I wanted, what I really wanted is for people to say, yes, we're measuring it directly. But I think what would be very interesting to see is if you were to, and it's not possible, but if you were to ask this question a year ago, what might be the difference? So I'm hoping and praying that this is encouraging, because the yes is growing. But I really want to make sure that we are cognizant of unconscious behavior. Conscious behavior is another ball game and probably another webinar.
Anna Maria, is this surprising for you as well?
I agree. I think the two guys have nailed it completely. I wish it was more, but I think it is very much so. And where we're at, the continuum and where things are at the moment, it's not the worst result. I suppose is what people are doing with it as well when they do measure it. It's really key.
So I'm going to launch another poll just quickly. There we go. Which is, how important is it that your advisors display empathy during customer interactions? Is it very important, important, neither important or unimportant, unimportant, or very unimportant? Hopefully got that one. Do you think this follows on, Anna Marie? Kind of people displaying their empathy?
I think it does, and it's definitely something, this is so linked to something I want to talk to about now. Sandra definitely alluded to it. Again, it's the context and support that they get when folks are of that nature that I want to talk about as well. So this will be curious for me to hear as well how people vote on this.
Fab, I will share that with you. So yeah, 85% saying very important and 15% saying important. Yeah, Jeremy, you're nodding along. Very good to see, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way, without being sort of too provocative, but if the answer to that was no, it's not important, from a technology point of view, you might as well have a chatbot or a bot kind of dealing with you. The massive differentiator that humans can offer in a customer service environment is empathy and nuance. So if that wasn't important, well, why were they there?
Yeah. Right, so I'm going to stop sharing. I think, Sandra, you had one more slide, actually.
Let's see what we got. It's just to say, if anyone wanted to continue the conversation. That's me and Daniel Goleman in Vienna. That's how much I'm loving EI. But if anyone wants to get in contact, they're very welcome to. I've got tons of content on this stuff, but thank you very much.
Fab, thank you very much for that. So I could see that the chat room's been buzzing along as we've been chatting. So we've had a tip in from Alex who said, build a culture within your company or direct team that encourages being open about emotions, a safe space for this that allows better understanding and leads to better communication. Yeah, Sandra, I think that's a great one.
Do you know, there are loads of tools out there now that allow people to have conversations about emotion. There's this kind of, it's kind of a bit of a dichotomy. People say they don't want to talk about it, but actually when you give them some tools to enable them to talk about it, you'd be surprised at how refreshing they find that. So yeah, I'll include some of those tools in the pack.
Yeah, and Anna-Marie, we were talking actually before the webinar, you know, I think culture is so important to kind of encourage that sharing and openness.
Yeah. So important. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the buzzword as well, psychological safety and all of that, you know, that we provide that for people. Jeremy, you had said too that a while ago, maybe it wasn't so commonplace. It's brilliant to see that people are able to express, but as you said, Sandra as well, it's been brought up in understanding, you know, how to articulate those emotions and things like that. So it's mindful of where all people are on the continuum. Yeah. And respect. And respect.
So we've had another tip in that says, for my teams, we conduct emotional intelligence training during the onboarding period with interval follow-ups. In addition, the leadership staff, including myself, keep emotional intelligence at the forefront by having conversations to share examples and best practices to ensure we're helping our team members through our actions. Yeah, Jeremy, I think we actually come on to this later, but what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly, I mean, this organisation are obviously pretty progressive in their thinking and obviously prepared to invest in it. And I think when you looked at Sandra's presentation about you know, employee retention and the lack of kind of employee lawsuits that companies were getting into, it's clearly quite a smart move. So yeah, credit to whoever this organisation are.
Yeah. So Renee said, we encourage our agents to pause and walk in the customer's shoes for a moment before responding and think about what would you want someone to feel, do, or communicate to you if you were making this request. And we've had a tip in from Joshua who said, speak to others at their level. Anna-Marie, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's really important, I think, tone of voice, and especially within a remote work and a hybrid space, is something that, you know, we really do need to invest in. So yeah, definitely the skill to be able to speak to people at their level, you know, empathy and all of that, so important to have the language.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's now time to hand over the baton to you to take us through your presentation. I'm just going to stop sharing.
Thank you very much. So I think I have a glamorous assistant, don't I, who's going to share for me?
Yeah. Oh. Don't you?
I can sing. Well, really, I'm really awful. I'm a terrible singer. Hopefully this presentation won't be as bad as that.
I'll get it open in the background as well.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Right, let me just share that. There we go.
There we go.
Sorted.
Okay, so the link between emotional intelligence and employee turnover in the hybrid workplace. Now, just to say that the research into the link hasn't occurred yet. And primarily it's because we're really moving into that reality. The image isn't clickbait, I might add, but it's an invitation, I think, if you will, to a genuine opportunity to positively influence employee turnover outcomes to the good for all. So a genuine possibility when we look at employee outcomes to reduce unhelpful, involuntary turnover, and ensure that voluntary turnover tells a great tale for the employee and the company. Just as jaunty, I'm going to just style it out. We're waiting for the slide to come up, my apologies. I really do appreciate you listening to me today. If you've just joined, just to say that, you know, basically there isn't a lot of, because I suppose I'm looking more towards the future with this, there isn't a lot of research. So I appreciate you letting me hypothesize And then you may say to yourself, well, you know, why would that matter? Why does her opinion no matter? So just to say, I have worked in a remote sphere for 8 years. I've worked 2 years in learning development, 4 years in operations, and the remainder in recruitment and professional services, respectively. I work with 1,000 other home workers who hail from 4 corners of the UK, most of whom I'm not going to meet, but we've formed solid working relationships and in some cases lifelong friendships. We have a rich remote ecosystem that enables us, our virtual BPO, which what Sensei is, to go to work. Now, as I said, most of what I'm going to speak about is anecdotal. There isn't a lot to research to draw on the hybrid workplace. But I want to start by saying that in the 100% remote environment that I'm accustomed to, I have witnessed and been positively affected by high levels of collective emotional intelligence. Levels that I've not witnessed thus far in bricks and mortar. Now that could change because we are in a very, very different workplace, if you like, a very, very different way. The pandemic has created many opportunities and many changes for us all. So what is collective emotional intelligence? In 2001, Druskett and Wolff defined collective emotional intelligence and its influence on group effectiveness as the ability of a group to develop a set of norms that manage emotional processes. Now, as a caveat, those exceptional and inspirational levels of collective emotional intelligence that I have witnessed occurred when community and the remote ecosystem were at their harmonious best. I have experienced also episodes where it's not been the happy case. So there are a few slides to follow. And what I want to do is to give a high level view of what I deem are the most important skills call center agents should have and potential stresses they may encounter. Looking, as I said, all of this with a view to what the new hybrid work environment is going to look like. So what you can see before you is a lovely stall. The stall has been set out. I want to look particularly at attraction and recruitment. The skills that are looked for. So, you know, emotional intelligence, the business side, what they're looking for. Now we've mentioned already, sorry if you could just go back to that slide for me, John, just about the lovely stall. We've mentioned already about empathy. I really want to focus on a business's self-awareness, a business's intelligent, emotional intelligence, congruence. So when you're setting out your stall, when you're attracting people to come work for you, what are you looking and why? Empathy. We've mentioned it here today. You know, 90% of people say that it's so important. And I'm asking as well, is it a buzzword? I'm just going to be a devil's advocate a wee bit. How much should a person have? If our KPIs are geared towards CPH, AHT, and if we employ people that have high levels of empathy, would they equate their experience maybe to that of a battery hen? Have you benchmarked as to what you want within your KPIs? What levels of empathy you're looking at? Now, Sandra made the big difference between emotional intelligence and empathy, but there are empathy quotients out there that determine that people can use and benchmark off. There's lots of that. Self-awareness. So just to say with that, just to be careful when you're setting out your stall about who you're recruiting and who you're attracting and how they should be looked at in the workspace going forward. Self-awareness. So the skills then that are so important that I feel are paramount that all workers, all employees should have, and that is self-awareness and self-regulation. They're key, and they should be actively nurtured within the new hybrid workplace. Sandra gave fantastic tips there about how you can do it yourself. But employees, and one of those comments as well, really lightened my heart to see that what companies are doing in that space. Debates rage as to whether AI can be developed or is it fixed like IQ, intelligence. I side with the former. So regardless of a person's level of empathy, or if the switch needs to be made, as sometimes it is in the MO, in the modus operandi within a contact center, a company's resolve to focus on development of people's self-awareness and their self-regulation will pay dividends, especially in these turbulent times. So if you're able to, if you look at all the things that Sandra went over as well, if you're able to understand feelings, triggers, what triggers you, your abilities, how you are with self and others, your tendencies, your strengths, your preferences, your limitations, to be able to challenge yourself, to self-manage, again, all the tips that Sandra mentioned. All of those are important. So no matter what comes at you in the hybrid or whatever else, you're able to check in and you're able to question what those emotions are and to find resolve. So thank you. I just want to move on to the next slide, John. I'm not being kind there. The last slide, see and to be seen. I spoke initially about the remote ecosystem that Sonsei have developed. As an element of that, in my opinion, crucial to enabling collective emotional intelligence. And folks, just to go back on that, I have witnessed that and the power of that and what that can do. And I want to give a wee bit of hope to people that maybe feel that within siloed places, that maybe that isn't the case. Certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were all in this together, we all felt that. I have been, throughout the years that I've worked in this space, I have seen it. I've seen it. And when it works well, boy, does it work. So to me, an element of that particular ecosystem was that really fostered and enabled collective emotional intelligence is a macro collaboration space. And basically what that is, essentially, it's a virtualization of a bricks and mortar contact center. So if you can picture like a unified, collaborative, perpetual workplace that's fit for large contact centers where people can be seen and they can see, and how important that is, again, with triggers, with regulation, with all of that. Sandra had mentioned about, if you have AI, then, you're not tripping so much to the HR department over things like that. Unfortunately, within the pandemic, folks, and maybe what's common, speaking to my colleagues within the counselling world, people have great coping mechanisms, but at these times they're severely rattled. So maybe a comment, a throwaway comment really has as a means of triggering people. So to practice that, again, just to stress that, with the platform, and because we have so little time to speak for hours on this, as you sort of getting that impression, I want to look at leaders just in particular in that and their role that they play. We talked there about the stresses for advisors. Again, with the platform, there are many other moving parts, example, culture, we talked about as well, Rachel, culture, psychological safety, portion of leaders' time, live and line management, numerous other facets that do contribute to that collective. But in the context of leaders and how potentially a virtual macro collaborative space can assist leaders and inform the experience of those they lead, particularly on the uncharted waters of hybrid working world. Mayer et al. Suggest in their work in 2000 that emotional intelligence might enable a leader to be better able to monitor how work groups are feeling and take the appropriate action. Now, I'm certain we can all agree that leaders with EI ability in the 4 broad categories of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management will cushion and stave advisor stress. But what if leaders can't effectively see or monitor their people? I want to leave you with this. An empirical study carried out by Langhorns in 2004 demonstrated that leaders, notably in a dynamic, challenging environment, who had the ability to control their emotions, effectively reduce team turnover. Now, to go back to the slide I started with, about what we can do and how we can inform and how we can change potential outcomes to make them for the better for all. The majority of us are currently in the most dynamic, challenging environment of our times. In this new hybrid workplace, how will advisors have sight of their leaders' 3D ability? Because we have a fine radar for want of a better word, BS, for different things, for understanding others' emotional intelligence, our own social awareness, all of that. So how can we know, how can we trust our leaders? How can we follow them if we're not able to see them, if our environment is siloed? So again, just to stress the importance of being seen and to see. And that's my talk today. Thank you so much for letting me share that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anna-Marie. I'm just going to share my screen, and actually we're going to have a poll immediately following that. Let me just launch that, which is, what do you see as the most important skill that every call center agent should have? So it is multiple choice. Is it technical proficiency and understanding of products/services? Is it clarity in communications, patience and listening capacity? Is it empathy, problem solving and flexibility, or organization and team collaboration and communication skills? I think we're asking if you could pick your top 3. Anna-Marie, what do you think? If you were a betting person, what are you hoping to see?
Most important skills every call, I think clarity in communications, empathy, and again the collaboration, I suppose. The aspect of collaboration. It's very, very important.
Yeah. Jeremy, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would sort of put technical proficiency up there as well, because I think certainly as a customer, if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't really understand what they're talking about or isn't empowered to solve your problem, that can create a frustration for the customer. But I guess selfishly, if there was a seventh box on this that said all of the above, you could tick all of them depending on which industry you're in.
Yeah. So let me just share the results. There we go. So 59% patience and listening capacity, 53% then empathy, 51% problem solving and flexibility, 50% clarity and communications, then 43% technical proficiency, and then 36% organisation and team collaboration and communication skills. Blimey. Sandra, is that, I think it's quite quite even all across the board, really.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about this, and I was thinking patience and listening critical, but I probably, if I was doing this, I probably would have voted for problem solving and flexibility, because of course we want to be heard, and you can't possibly solve the problem unless you've really listened to what the problem is. But ultimately, when we think about what we want out of these interactions, we just want the thing to be sorted out, and we wouldn't probably be calling unless we could solve it ourselves. So it's very interesting to see how actually there's a kind of a window, isn't there, where all of these are. So yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. And Jeremy, this is kind of what you were hoping for, the tick all the above, really.
Yeah, I think it is, because there's definitely not a right or wrong answer here, is there?
No.
It would be the perfect kind of customer service person would have all of those skills.
Fab. So I'm going to share another poll, which is, what is the biggest causes of stress for contact center advisors? So this is another pick your top three. Is it broken processes? Is it other departments? Is it job demands, complexity? Is it high contact volumes? Is it unhappy customers, connectivity, broadband speeds? Is it target metrics or tools that are confusing or difficult to use? Jeremy, I don't know what your thoughts are on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect a lot of frustration comes from the fact of, advisor knowing what customer service is needed to be given and not being able to give it. And that could be, because you've been given a target to deal with a customer within 1 minute and you're on an average handle time metric. It could be that the organization's got disjointed systems and processes. It could be that you just don't understand enough about, the product or the subject area you've been asked to talk to, which is a training issue. But underneath it, I think it's that feeling of not being able to do a good job is probably the piece that drives most dissatisfaction.
Yeah, and Anna-Marie, from your point of view, what sort of things do you think cause the biggest amount of stress?
I think when you're an advisor, you are at the coalface. You're on the phone. You have to come up with whatever it is in the moment. Jeremy, Sandra agree with me in that generally people at heart want to do their best. For me, I think that broken promises for sure. Broken processes, Freudian slip, broken processes. Again, broadband speed could be an interesting one there as well.
I will share the results. And yep, 62% of people saying broken processes, 44% then saying unhappy customers. There's a bit in the middle with 35% high contact volumes, 32 job demands. 34, missed one out. Tools that are confusing, then targets and metrics, then other departments, and actually at the bottom, connectivity, broadband speeds. I think, quite an interesting array. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on those, especially broken processes?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's been really common, hasn't it, that, pre-pandemic, the amount of times you would call a call center and someone would say, I'm really sorry, my system's running slow, the screen's running slow, sorry, I've got to go into another system for this, which is just kind of screaming at you that you haven't got the proper process or system integration. And now you've just basically put that problem on the lap of the call center agent to somehow bridge that gap. So it's not a surprise to me that's come up. And I think for a lot of organizations, the shift to hybrid and remote working has just exacerbated that problem.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a great opportunity to hand over the baton to you and take us through your presentation.
Great. Well, thank you. So yeah, as Jonty loads up those slides, I'll just kind of start to kick things off and start talking. So the first slide that we're looking at is really, some statistics, and these are based on a range of research. Enghouse, one of the research pieces on the next slide, Jonty, is some research that was custom research commissioned by Enghouse, and basically talks about the amount of increase in volume of interactions and calls that most organizations are having to deal with right now. And the average was like 37%. We have one customer where it went up 300%. So, if you imagine when you called a contact center, particularly on a Monday morning, and you heard that tune say, or that comfort message saying, I'm really sorry, but we're experiencing high volume of calls right now. Most businesses in the last year were not equipped to scale up a 37% increase, and for many, a lot more than that. And the impact of that has meant that, there's been a lot of stress, I think, in the general public, full stop. And unfortunately, some of that has cascaded into the headsets of contact center agents, and resulting in, 30% of them near enough putting their hand up to say, I can't cope. And perhaps more worryingly for things as an industry, 90% of them saying they're planning on leaving their job once the pandemic unwinds, which, hugely concerning at a micro level for the organization. But when you think as a country, nearly 5% of the workforce is employed in some way, shape or form in, customer service and contact centers, that's quite a significant stone in the middle of a pond that's rippling out quite a long way. And so as we start to move to the next slide, we start to look at what are some of the smart organizations, doing. And it sounds obvious, but some organizations have spent quite a lot of time and money listening to the voice of the customer, evaluating what the customer feels, what are they thinking. They haven't spent as much time thinking about what does their staff and their agents feel. So it's very, very easy to point those technologies inwards as well as outwards, and survey, how does your agent feel? And that could be just as easy as having 3 emojis on the wrap-up screen of your system to say, smiley face, not smiley face, or average smiley face. But at least you start to get some insight into how that individual is feeling. At the more sort of sophisticated end of it, you've got technologies like real-time speech analytics that can listen in exactly the same way as your Amazon Echo on your kitchen worktop listens to your commands. It can listen to a conversation and sense people's voices and whether they're happy or sad or angry or using the wrong language. So lots of things can be done, if there's the will and the mindset and the culture to do so. And as we now move to the next slide, we start to think about the foundations of bringing this together, and collaboration tools, unified communication has been a big piece of that. So we've seen, it's probably not by accident that Microsoft share price has kind of hit an all-time high, and Microsoft Teams has been the fastest selling application in Microsoft history. Lots of organizations in the last 12 months had to find an answer to collaboration and unified communications, and Teams was one of the beneficiaries of that. So I think a lot of movement there. And then when we start to think about kind of key trends, there was probably something like 5 years of evolution compressed into 5 months last year. So lots of the things that we see today were happening already, but companies' hands got forced. They had to move at a much faster pace. So one of the questions, right up the front of this was talking about employee and agent empathy, and is it important? Well, lots of organizations are investing money right now in automation and AI and bots to filter out really that routine, mundane stuff that doesn't require empathy, because candidly a computer can do it and do it more consistently and cheaper. So we're seeing traction and efforts there, and we're also seeing a lot of investment around self and social service. Customers are willing to self-serve or use social service. Some of the people on here are probably giffgaff mobile customers who are right up there in terms of social service, but the use of, if you've had 5 customers ask you the same problem, that's life is telling you you probably need to post something in an FAQ or create a YouTube video or post that answer so that the 6th person doesn't need to call you about it. So, you know, and that leads you on to the whole story of knowledge management, which is a webinar in itself. But, you know, as you move to the digital world, it's a key component of it. And then finally, as we start to think about what's the right approach, and is it evolution? And we talked about the 5 years compressed into 5 months. Is it revolution and you just control alt delete? Is it cut and paste? Again, there isn't a right or wrong answer. It depends on your organization. What I would say is cut and paste doesn't work. You know, trying to cut and paste a culture from a physical world to a virtual world doesn't work. And taking more of a digital by design approach is what we advocate to customers. You know, picking the important customer journeys that drive revenue, risk and reward and cost to your organization, and optimizing them like on an 80-20 rule. So 80% of the interactions, they're the ones that you really want to focus on, and just make sure that they're really slick, smooth processes. And I think most people on here have bought something off of Amazon in the last 12 months. If you ask yourself, when was the last time you called Amazon about a problem, you kind of realize how much effort they put into that customer journey. The problem's been automated out of it. They know you, they know who you are, they know what you're likely to want and do next, and they've already thought it and got the answer there. So they're using all of that insight in a smart way to give you a better customer experience and obviously keep you loyal to them. So as we start to wrap up, some of the kind of key tips really is data is the new oil. And the reason I say that is, you know, again, it's a subject in itself, but as you transition to a digital world, that comes with a set of expectations. Customers are interacting with many different businesses in a digital form. And if you've gone for that cut and paste approach, where you've tried to cut and paste your physical business into a virtual world, people have an expectation of how things should work. And they have an expectation that you know who they are. You know, if you had a conversation in a chat, they expect you to know that when you pick up the phone. So joining things up is pretty important. We touched on self and social service. It's so underrated and it's so powerful if you get it right. Knowledge management, what I would say here is that it's a little bit like using Google. If you typed into Google today, nearest Italian restaurant, and when you got there, you found it closed down 5 months ago, your confidence in Google will go down significantly. So knowledge management doesn't just happen. It needs investment and it needs people to keep it up to date. But again, get it right and it makes sense. Aligning your channels is really key. So it's not just a case of adding more channels, it's really adding the right channels at the right time. And if you haven't got the right skills and people there, don't add them because you're just going to create a customer disappointment. And then finally, we touched on this right at the start of it all, but the culture is the linchpin of all of this. As much as a technology company, I'd love to tell you it was all about the software. It's actually really all about the culture. The software piece is pretty straightforward. You've got to get that culture and KPIs right. And on that KPI piece, there was a company call center yesterday, and it was like headline news that had to kind of row back from measuring employees by, the screen cam was taking photos of the agents. It was taking a photo of their screen, basically making sure that they were doing work all the time. And so you've got this real debate now of trying to drive productivity, but, there's a massive issue around trust. And so lots of organizations wrestling with that cultural gap. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Rachel. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Just going to share my screen. A great presentation. Thank you very much for that. So we're going to go on to another poll and ask, which of the following tools has the biggest impact on agent engagement? Is it collaboration tools? Is it desktop consolidation? Is it gamification? Is it omni-channel, WFM systems, or video communications? Jeremy, what sort of things do you think have had or what sort of tools do you think have had the biggest impact?
Well, I think, collaboration tools, so, platforms like Teams are really important. That ability to be able to instant message a colleague and try and get an answer quickly, or use presence and availability to see who else within a certain team is online, or dip into a certain document repository to to look up a quick crib sheet or an FAQ sheet to just help you service a customer. I think that will kind of come out, you know, fairly high. Omnichannel has always, you know, been really, really important, and even more so when you move into the virtual world. On a day-to-day basis, on a practical basis, workforce management systems, you know, are key in terms of scheduling your shifts and stuff. So yeah. So I think it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, Anna-Marie, you were agreeing with the collaboration tools.
I'm waxing lyrical, I suppose, because for us we use a macro, but in terms of the hybrid and what's common in engagement, you know, Rich, I was really interested in a webinar I attended recently that agents who are working in the office felt that they were going to be in the back foot. So I think collaboration tools, again, I can't stress enough how much macro, whatever you're looking at, the other collaboration tools, Slack, Google, Teams, brilliant. As Jeremy has said, you know, the increase, but definitely for me, the macro collaboration.
So I'm going to share results. Yep, you were both looking at my screen. 58% of people saying collaboration tools, then kind of 10% video communicate. Oh, omnichannel 12, video 10, gamification 9, and desktop consolidation 8, with WFM systems at 3%. Pleased to see that one then, Anna-Marie. Yeah. Sandra, you know, what are your thoughts on collaboration tools?
I think it underpins everything, doesn't it? I mean, I think it helps with people's health and well-being because people can keep in touch, they can solve problems, they can, you know, find things out. It helps you keep informed. So again, from that point of kind of social intelligence and wanting to be connected, that's where I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and Jeremy, pleased with that result?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of what we would have probably have expected, because it is a little bit like building a house. If you haven't got that right unified communication platform and collaboration environment, everything else is going to be a little bit of a struggle. So I'm not surprised it's up there.
Yeah. So I'm now going to share our last poll. You'll be pleased to know, which is: what training needs is your organisation prioritising to support home and remote working agents? So it is multiple choice. So is it optimising the use of call centre systems, so technology from home? Is it adapting interpersonal skills for customers under stress? Is it virtually managing a team? Is it advice on health and well-being in the home workplace? Or is it remote workplace assessments and home workstation setup? Anna-Marie, I know you were very passionate about this, and you know, training wise.
I think again, when we know the old adage, how many people leave because of their manager. So virtually managing a team should be definitely up there. And again, as I said in my presentation, we're all talking about interpersonal skills, because regardless of who's managing you or what's happening, if you have the ability to regulate and are aware of what's going on with you, it'll carry you through.
Brilliant. And Sandra, you know, what are you hoping to see come out?
I think the interpersonal skills, but interestingly, I wonder if people were given the choice, it was interpersonal skills for themselves, you know, that whole resilience bit. But yeah, let's see the results.
I won't keep you hanging, so I will share the results. So 65% saying virtually managing a team, 52% saying using call center systems, 48% saying health and well-being, 35% on interpersonal skills, and 20% on kind of the setup. Anna-Marie, you must be really pleased with that.
Delighted, Rachel, honestly, and it's great to see that everybody's the same mindset in that regard. How understand the differences, should we say, in this way, because we look so much to our leaders, you know. So yeah, totally agree.
Fab. And Jeremy, you're looking pleased as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really pleased it came out. That would have been the one I picked, and I think there was an assumption, wasn't there, 12 months ago? I look at you know, my children's school and the teachers, and the teachers, many of them had spent, you know, 20, 30 years teaching in physical classrooms, and then suddenly in the space of a month they were now teaching over video platforms, and there was just an expectation, yeah, you'll be able to do that, and actually it's a completely different medium, it's a completely different environment, you don't get the same feedback, all of those things. And I think it's very much the same here, that there is just sometimes organizations have an expectation that people will transition and be able to manage things virtually, and it isn't the same. And there was, I think it was the second or third tip from the chat room that came up that was really good, because it talked about, you know, the investment the company were making, not just in you know, agent, you know, empathy skills, but also those of the people that manage them.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. So we're going to go to the chat room and have, I'm going to stop sharing, there we go, see what they've been chatting about. So we've had an opinion, there we go, from Dion, who said emotional intelligence is super important for all companies. So glad you're in the right place. So we've had a question in, which is, how do you prevent yourself or others to use this skill to manipulate or being manipulated by others to achieve a specific outcome? Anna-Marie, you're...
I'm not awake, I'm not in dog. It's like I'll brush myself.
It makes it easy to pick on you.
All right, I'll know. Note to self. So it sounds, Ellie, that potentially that you're in a situation, just the question, the way it's framed. What I would say is, again, self-awareness, self-regulation, regardless of what's happening. You're aware of this particular thought challenge, what that means for you, what's it bringing up, what's it triggering, and look at ways, as Sandra talked about, things to help you regulate. Taking that walk, breathing exercises, being present, different things like that to see how you are. You can't, I suppose, manipulate outcomes to that degree. You can only really work on yourself with that. Maybe look for another job. We're hard.
We had another question from Ellie saying, does emotional intelligence limit your critical thinking, and how often does it fire back at you? Sandra, I don't know, you're looking puzzled.
So first of all, I'd like to quickly jump to the last question just for a second, just to add a little bit of value. It's okay. I think the key thing here, Ellie, is to invite the person you think is manipulating you to have their own self-awareness. So you might consider using a tool called SBI, which is situation, behavior, and impact, and say, when you do this thing, this is how I feel. And then it's up to them to change how they're being with you. So I just wanted to get that out on the table because I could feel myself wanting to share it. Let's get to that. Let's get to that question that's here. So does emotional intelligence limit your critical thinking? I would say that it doesn't limit your critical thinking. If anything, it gives you something called a growth mindset, because it stops you from thinking that something is black and white. You are far more curious and you're more accepting, and you can start to consider far more. Having the sensation again and having that self-awareness of knowing what's going on in your body means you might make better decisions. As far as how often does it backfire on you, it's still a learning process. Becoming emotionally intelligent takes some time. I think that when you give yourself forgiveness for practicing and it might not go the right way, then be patient with it. That's the best way I think I can answer that.
Thank you very much for that, Sandra. So we've had a tip in saying leaders should shadow their staff in the role to fully understand and be able to effectively manage them. Jeremy, I can see you nodding on and agreeing with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always had a feeling that as a manager, you should never ask somebody to do something you're not prepared to do yourself, or even better, that you haven't already done at some point yourself. Because, I mean, if you don't really understand the context, how can you manage people without really knowing how long or how difficult something is to do?
And how would you do this in kind of the, you know, people working from home and things? You know, obviously shadowing staff becomes a lot harder. You know, is it this kind of collaboration tools that we were just talking about?
Well, one of the technologies that it was interesting, because we were talking right at the start of this, weren't we, about debt collection, and that's a highly regulated industry, and it's an industry where, whether you like it or not, the agents have to use specific phrases provided to them by the FCA. So, and what the software that we were using with one debt collection agency showed up was certain phrases was just like petrol on a bonfire in terms of emotionally charging the person they were talking to. It just put people's backs up, and they used that to actually go back to the FCA and say, you know, this is not good language. But interesting, more organisations now are using that technology because it can sense emotion. It can sense if somebody's angry or stressed or talking over or using swear words, and that can create a trigger you know, a bit like an alarm bell to a supervisor to say, look, one of your team's in the middle of a really bad call right now. You might want to jump into that call and kind of take over or help out. So I think, you know, in this particular context, that's one of the areas that, you know, it could be, but it doesn't have to be driven by a trigger on a piece of software. You could just say, I'll jump onto your next call and share a call, you know. So so I think that's definitely a way where, you know, supervisors can definitely support.
Rachel, could I add something to that? Just
yeah, sure.
Yeah, is that okay? Just the thing is, what's jumping out for me there is leaders and manage. So leaders and management, to my view, managers are different things. But one of the things that I would turn that on their head, trust. You follow people that you trust. So one of the ways maybe is to not just to shadow them. As Jeremy says, I understand what you mean. You know, it's important to know the job, but it's important to listen to the person, because you won't be the expert. You won't always be the expert in everything. So that listening to your staff, I think, engenders, you know, to that effective management or trust, or whatever way you want to look at it there. So I just thought I'd add that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And unfortunately, we've reached the top of the hour. So I just want to say, if you could write in the chat room in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? The winning tip comes from Alex, who said, take time in your one-to-ones to not talk about stats and performance. Just discuss how your employee is feeling, anything that they need from you. That is their time to discuss what's going on with them at that time. So well done, Alex. We will be in touch after the webinar. Just a reminder that we have a survey. If you could complete that when you leave. The recording will be available in about an hour's time on callcenterhelper.com/recorded-webinars. We've got a break for a week, but we'll be back on the 6th of May with how to simplify customer journeys. But to today's speakers, I just want to say thank you very much to all of you. A brilliant webinar. To Sandra Thompson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And to Anna-Marie Quinn, thank you for a great first webinar.
Thank you. And
to Jeremy Payne, thank you very much. A great webinar as always.
Likewise, thank you all very much.
Thank you, and we'll see you in a few weeks' time. Thank you.
Rachel,
Bye.
thanks a million. Bye, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye. Take care of yourselves.